Welcome back, travellers, or welcome new travellers, to the Willow Archives podcast. I'm your host, Robin, and again with me is Gretchen, my co-host. Today we are diving into the city of Drovehaven, the beating heart of Darvacel, a city built on trade, salt water, and survival, where cargo ships once packed the harbour so tightly you could cross the docks without ever touching the street, where the markets never truly sleep, and where the people learned, long ago, that if the northern horns sound, you pray the walls hold. The city itself sits in the centre of the continent, between the meeting of different waterways. Up on your screen is a picture of Drovehaven. As you can see to the west is the market district, where caravans flood through the main gates from sunrise to sunset. When you first pass through the gates, the smell of stables greets you immediately. Sweet dried hay, fresh cut grass mixed with the sharp, pungent smell of dung and urine. But deeper into the market square, those smells are overtaken by fresh bread from the bakers, ale and yeast that drifts from the brewers, and spices rolling in along the foreign caravans. Food vendors sell sizzling meat skewers from crowded stalls, while merchants shout over packed crowds trying to sell their wares above the noise of the grinding wagon wheels and the restless crowds. At the center of the district stands the Merchants' Guild, a massive hall where nearly every business entering Drovehaven eventually finds itself.
And if you're ever in the city, you should stop by my tavern while you're there. Just keep a hand on your coin purse around the markets.
To the south, the harbour still serves as the beating heart of the city. You'll know when you reach the southern end of the city, because the cold, salty air welcomes you long before the harbour comes into view. Your senses are hit by the smell of fish, rotting nets, grease, tar, and wet wood darkened by years of sea breeze. These days, smaller ships fill the docks more often than the massive cargo vessels Drovehaven was once known for. Sailors and dock workers shout over one another while crates scrape across the docks beneath the cries of gulls circling overhead. The beggars gather here, crying out for help from the merchants and the lesser nobles that make their way into the city.
Most folks avoid the harbors unless they got business there. Both the city's sewage and its pool eventually end up there.
Straight east, you'll find the streets cleaner, the buildings more extravagant, and the air far easier to breathe. This is where the wealthy, educated, and influential gather behind polished white stone, where the towering halls of the Magic Guild remind the common folk exactly who holds power. Though there are no true checkpoints leading into the Eastern District, most people avoid it nonetheless. Guards there tend to watch outsiders closely.
And if you don't look like you belong there, they make sure you know it. Once I got thrown into a holding cell because I forgot to wear my Sol-Day best while handling business in that district.
And to the north, beneath the shadow of an ancient wall, sits the noble estates of the quiet buildings of the High Council, where rumors speak of rituals no one's supposed to know about.
Common folk like myself aren't typically allowed entrance into these parts. Several checkpoints lay between the northern gate and the High Council's building. Not that I would want to be found there anyways. I'd rather be down in the market district. It may be loud, crowded, and at times undignified, but it's far more fun and cheery.
Now, Drovehaven is a city that grew faster than anyone could control. And like most cities that were built too quickly, homes stack atop old homes. Alleyways turn into streets, and streets turn into markets. And over centuries of trade, the city became the wealthiest in the kingdom, earning its nickname, the King's Purse.
King's Purse. Funny name for a city where half the folks are barely scraping together enough coin for supper. But I suppose that's how kingdoms work, eh? Money slips through the hand of the common folk, paying for food, patching leaky roofs, covering back-breaking taxes, before eventually finding its way north into the noble estates, the guild vaults, and the church halls, paying for the comfort the nobility have.
Though the common folk of Drovehaven may not live lavish lives, they live far safer ones than the people who first founded the city. Before the guild vaults, the noble estates, and crowded markets, Drovehaven was little more than a struggling settlement beside the bay. The city was first settled by only a handful of families, and these families built their homes where the crossing of water and land trade collided. And unbeknownst to them, they had settled atop the graveyard of an ancient civilization, marked only by the towering northern walls that separate the settlement from the Fey Wilds, the forest now known as the Glade Leaf Wilds.
That wall's been there longer than even I've been alive, and I was among the first city settlers. I remember when I was young, my mother used to tell me stories about the Glade Leaf Wilds. Whenever the fog rolled in from the forest, she would warn me never to go out at night. She said that if you were ever outside after dark, and the forest suddenly went quiet, and you heard voices crying out from the fog, it was already too late. Not because the voices attracted monsters, but because the voices were the monsters. She told me about the hollow giants, how these creatures carry whispers in their bodies, voice trapped in their hollow ribs like wind through broken holes. Some sounded like crying, some like pleading, and some sounded like people you loved, calling your name from somewhere deep in the mist. She used to say that's how they hunted foolish travelers. You'd follow the voices thinking someone needed help, and by the time you realized the whispers were coming from inside the giant itself, it was already standing over you. When I was a child, I thought those stories were just meant to scare me into behaving. It wasn't until I was older that I stopped believing they were only stories.
Each year, the settlement grew larger, with more and more people calling it home. What began as a small settlement slowly grew into a village, and then a town, and then finally into the city that thousands call home today. But it wasn't all smooth sailing for the people who settled the land. After years of uninhibited growth, the village celebrated its 85th anniversary. That night, the streets were loud with music, celebration, and life. The noise carried over the walls, and for the first time in generations, the noise beyond the wall woke the giants of the Glade Leaf Wilds. The village had grown loud enough for the wilds to finally answer back.
I can still hear the sounds of the creatures awakening, and the monsters' cries. They weren't roars. Not really. More like 1,000 tormented souls screaming together from the bottom of a well. I remember the first call. The noise of the celebration cut off all at once. No alarm bells rang. No people screamed. Just silence. No one had noticed the fog spilling into the festivities. It filled the empty spaces between people, creeping through the streets unnoticed. And then I saw one for the first time. The first giant didn't attack. Not at first. It just stood there, half hidden in the fog beyond the trees. Its glowing eyes turned my blood cold. Then slowly, we heard the whispers. That night changed Drovehaven forever.
After that night, what remained of the village lived in silence as the walls of Drovehaven were constructed. The kingdom poured soldiers, stone, and coin into Drovehaven, determined to secure the trading port that became the beating heart of its growing wealth. After the establishment of the Church of the Living Tree in Drovehaven, the mages of the church, known as angels, began driving the hollow giants deeper into the Gladeleaf wilds, and over time, sightings grew fewer, the cries beyond the walls became rarer, and for the first time in generations, the people of Drovehaven believed the city might finally be safe.
We still get hollow giant sightings every year, but it's been over 80 years since one came for the walls. Most people in the city don't fear the hollow giants anymore. Me, though, I remember the days of the Great Giant Wars.
If you'd like future episodes of the Great Giant Wars, stories that include Gretchan Winterlock, the Giant Slayer, please comment below. Now, the Church of the Living Tree and its angels were welcomed in Drovehaven with open arms. At the time, the city was exhausted. The overwhelming fear, death, and constant battles against the hollow giants had left the settlement desperate for stability. The angels of the church helped reinforce the walls, organize defenses, heal the wounded, and continued pushing the giants further into the Gladeleaf Wild. And as the city grew safer, the church spread its roots deeper into Drovehaven. The early angels raised the great halls of the Magic Guild around a preserved patch of forest, its white stone walls built carefully around the ancient trees that still stand there today.
What began as a handful of priests and wandering healers slowly became churches, healing houses, orphanages, and record halls woven into nearly every part of life. People started turning to the church for everything, and over time, the church became the authority of the city.
Many residents looked to the church not only for guidance during hardship, but also for spiritual purpose as well. The church worships Uravel, the god of magic and divine order. And as the teachings of the church became increasingly common, older gods such as Nimbris, the goddess of water and fertility, Kairos, the god of war, Edrin, the god of harvest, and Morvain, the god of the dead, were slowly folded into the church's teachings.
You'd still hear sailors praying the Nimbus before storms, farmers still thanked Edrin for good harvests, soldiers were still whispering prayers to Kairos before battle, and nobody in their right mind would ignore Morvain when death came knocking. But sooner or later, most roads led back to Orvel and the Living Tree.
And with the church's influence came control over something even more powerful than politics or trade: magic. As the city continued to grow, so did the number of spellcasters, enchanters, and inscribers living within its walls. The church believed magic without purpose or restraint threatened not only the people of Drovehaven, but the very order of the world itself.
If you ask me, people started solving their own problems of magic. Healing wounds, moving cargo, protecting homes, just making life easier. And once folks stopped depending on institutions, well, those institutions tend to get nervous. So the angels began regulating its use. Not that regulations weren't warranted. Truth be told, most common folk are terrified of uncontrolled magic. For good reason, too. One bad spellcaster can burn down a city block. One cursed object can poison a family for generations. People like to feel protected, even when protection comes with rules.
The church established strict regulations around the use of magic. Any public use of spellcraft, enchantments, or inscriptions had to be approved and documented by the church. The punishment for breaking those laws depended heavily on the severity of the offense. Minor infractions, such as unlicensed inscriptions, small enchantments, or a single unregistered spell, often resulted in fines, the taking of magical materials, forced church service, or temporary imprisonment. More serious crimes like illegal magical trade, repeated offences, or unauthorized teachings carried far harsher penalties. Longer imprisonment, magical suppression, and seizure of property, and not just magical property. We're talking homes, life, everything. And the most severe crimes, like demonic contracts, forbidden rituals, veil tampering, or magical killings, these could result in execution, transportation to the mines, or worse, disappearance into the High Council's custody.
And even with punishments like that, people still use magic in their everyday lives. Truth is, magic made life easier. People were never going to stop using it entirely. That's when the Watch was established.
The Watch isn't openly visible like the city guard is, nor does it hold an official public authority. Most serve as investigators, informants, or observers, working in service of the Church of the Living Tree. They move quietly through the city, watching from the chateaus, and reporting back to the church.
Nobody really knows who belongs to the Watch. Most times, you don't even know they're around until somebody gets dragged off to a dungeon, or shipped north to the mines. And the church pays well for information. In hard times like these, people are willing to squeal if it means the family gets to eat that night. But I would say most people support the Watch, right up until someone they love disappears because of it.
Next time, we will have a special episode where the creator of Candlelight and Contracts talks about the behind the scenes of what goes into writing her book, along with how she came up with the series and some of the characters. Until the next record is unsealed, stay curious.